Welcome to episode 25 of Shane Talks 99. Now, if you've ever seen Kevin Smith's first stand-up special, An Evening with Kevin Smith, then you've heard Kevin tell the story about the failed Superman project that he worked on in the 90s and this bizarre meetings that he kept having with producer John Peters. And in the story, Kevin Smith tells about how Peters had this obsession with spiders and his demand that Superman in the third act of the film fights a giant spider. Kevin ends the story by revealing what we all knew. After the failure of this Superman project, John Peters took his obsession with spiders and demanded that it be included into the script for Wild Wild West. Wild Wild West is a terribly unbalanced film that feels like it never truly knows what it's meant to be. Um, this is really evident in the script and in doing my research on this piece of crap. I found that this movie was around for a lot of the 90s, went through a couple of different iterations and had a number of different writers on it. And I feel like that's pretty evident with this. Like, it just doesn't feel right. There's a lot of stuff in it that just is very, like, from one scene to the next, the characters don't talk or act the same way. And, like, whoever did the final draft of it did not do a good job of blending together all these different stuff. Like, there's just, at some moments it's like full of racial stereotype jokes, and then we have other jokes that are made at like, I mean, not really like like half people jokes, I guess. Like, Will Smith's character takes a lot of shots at Kenneth Branagh's character because he's in a wheelchair, but like not only just like in a wheelchair, but like doesn't have the bottom half of his body. So like, and, I and all these jokes were just to set up the stupidity of the end when said mechanical spider shows up in the movie. And like it's just like an overcompensation point for the main villain. Like I don't it's honestly not even worth talking about. And like what's worse about this is it's directed by Barry Sonnenfeld, who up until this point I really liked as a director, but I don't think he's done much post 90s that I've enjoyed. I mean, like he did both of the live action Addams Family movies. He did a Michael J. Fox movie called For Love or Money that I really enjoy. He directed Get Shorty, which is fine. And then like he hit it out of the park with Men in Black, also starring Will Smith. So yeah, Will Smith. So we've got pre-slap Will Smith. Good old Hollywood gold Big Willie style. Like everything he touches is amazing until we get to this point. Like starting in 1995, 1995 was like the can Will Smith do a summer blockbuster? Let's give him an April release date. April of 95 was when Bad Boys came out, and Bad Boys was really good. So the next year in 96, they moved him right up into the holiday weekend, gave him July 3rd, when he was in the mega blockbuster and aptly named film Independence Day. 97, a year later, July 2nd, he had Men in Black. 98 saw another shift where they wanted to see can Will Smith do holiday like Christmas movie. Like not it's not a Christmas movie, but a Christmas release. That holiday window, that November Thanksgiving to December window. And that's when they released Enemy of the State. Probably not the most successful of them, but it probably was more successful at that point than it would have been in the summer. I don't entirely remember everything that came out summer of 98. But yeah, so he was getting toyed around with the holiday, like let's release a like the audiences want Will Smith at the holidays when families are together. Who can draw them to the theater better than the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air? Until 1999, when we get this movie, we get Wild Wild West, and like I tend to badmouth this movie a lot. I'd only ever seen it once until this week. I absolutely did not enjoy anything about it. But I badmouthed it a lot, and people look like some of my friends give me like blowback on it, like, oh, it's not as bad as you make it out to be. But I mean, like, it has a 4.9 rating on the IMDb. So like, I mean, maybe I'm wrong in my friend group, but I feel like more people out there agree with me than don't. So yeah, like I said, I've had people try to sell me on not hating this movie. And if you don't hate this movie, more power to you. To each their own. If this is your jam and you can find something fun and enjoyable in this piece of shit, like that is all up to you. But like as I've talked about on this podcast and the regular Shane Talks podcast, as I've gotten older, I've revisited a lot of movies that I hated in the past, and I've not hated them as much. Like the bigger one being Groundhog Day, where I literally hated Groundhog Day for 20 plus years. Watched it a couple of years ago, and it's fine now. Like I still don't like the movie, but I don't have the undying hatred that I had for it previously when I would talk about it. So I've been trying to rewatch all these 1999 movies just to make sure they're fresh in my head when I'm talking about them. So I suffered through Wild Wild West this week. It was not available to stream for free anywhere normally. You can rent it a bunch of places, but a server that I have access to had the movie on there, so I went ahead and watched that there. So I did not have to pay to rent it, and it's still crap. I still did not find anything in this movie that I enjoyed. I wouldn't be able to talk so freshly about how terrible the script was if I didn't rewatch it. But I mean, like I said earlier, there's literal scene to scene. The characters don't act the same. The characters aren't believable. Their dialogue is terrible. Like there's so much stupidity in this movie, and I mean, I have to think that John Peters being involved in being the producer has a large part to do with it. But like I said, like this went through three or four different writing teams throughout the 90s. Like George Clooney was supposed to be in this movie at one point. Tom Cruise was supposed to be in this movie at one point. Like I can't even remember who was supposed to be in there before Tom Cruise, but like all these other actors kept bowing out to go do other projects. I mean, it sounds like this was in kind of a development lingo for a while where they were trying to get a good script, which they still never did. If you're not aware, Wild Wild West is based on a like 60s or 70s Western. Oh, Western. There we go. That was it. Mel Gibson was the original person who was attached to this movie. Him and Richard Donner were both originally attached to do this in the early 90s. For whatever reason, they left and went off and made Maverick instead. So those two guys wanted to make a Western, and they ended up finding a way to remake an old TV show as a Western. They just did it with a far superior film in Maverick. Um, so like the cast in this is just not good. Kevin Kline is probably one of the worst performances I've ever seen from him. And like I'm a huge Selma Hayek fan, but that could have been any other actress playing her part. She didn't bring anything to it other than the 2 seconds that I get to see her bare ass, which, like, to be honest, is probably not even her bare ass. It's probably a stunt double's ass. So, like, I mean, now that I think about that, that's not even really worth watching the movie for. Like, and then the biggest waste in, like, all of cinema history, possibly. I mean, maybe not. Maybe that's going a little too far, but you have the master of Shakespeare, Sir Kenneth Branagh, playing this absolutely terrible villain that's just garbage, that's so Napoleon complex syndrome villain, like just a terrible accent, terrible delivery, terrible facial expressions. Like, I mean, even the cutting of his, like the grooming of his beard in this movie pisses me off. Like, there's nothing that I remember from this movie that's enjoyable on any level, on any aspect. None of the gags are fun. None of the contraptions that Kevin Kline's character creates are fun. Like nothing is brought to this movie that makes me go, oh, well, this is a bad movie, but this is redeeming about. There's nothing redeeming in the entire movie. Like and again, for those people that claim that I hate this movie too much, a lot of Hollywood agreed with it. And every year there has to be Razzies. Every year there's got to be bad movies. And I know that I talked up 99 and I had an episode a month ago where I claimed it was the worst week of 1999. And it may have been, but like statistically, this week is the worst week of 1999 because Wild Wild West on March 25th of 2000 ended up winning 5 Golden Raspberry Awards. Those included Worst On-Screen Couple for Will Smith and Kevin Kline, Worst Song for Will Smith's Wild Wild West, Worst Screenplay. Makes perfect sense. There's no debating that. Worst Director, which sucks because, like I said, Sonnenfeld did a lot of stuff that I like, and it won the Golden Raspberry for the worst film of 1999. And like I can't argue that. I know there's some other movies in here that I've talked about that I hate worse than Wild Wild West, but I fully support Wild Wild West being a terrible movie from 1999. Um, But I just talked about Will Smith's Wild Wild West winning the Razzie for Worst Song of the Year. I can't support that. Like, it's not a bad song. Like, it's catchy. It's a dancing song. Like, I mean, in the late '90s, hanging out at the under 21 clubs that I was at that point in my life. I mean, that song got played a lot. Um, it features Cisco and Drew Hill, Cisco in Drew Hill at that point. It's got Cool Mo D on the song. Like, it's not a bad song. I don't hate the song in any way. If it comes on, I don't like. I mean, I might think about turning it just because the mental trauma that it gives me from having to think about Wild Wild West. But like, Will Smith was not bad about his like lyrics writing for that song, and it's fine. And the overall soundtrack isn't a bad soundtrack either. It did a very '90s thing that I respect, that Jason and I have talked about numerous times. It got some bangers from some really good artists, and it put them on an album together. This one has Enrique Iglesias on it. It has Blackstreet. It has Faith Evans, Slick Rick. There's Common and Jill Scott do a song together. Lil Bow Wow and Jermaine Dupri do a song together. And then like two goats of all time are on this album when Dre and Eminem do a song together on the Wild Wild West album. So like it's a decent soundtrack. It's not terrible. I owned it. I looked and I don't still own it, so I got rid of it at some point. But in 1999, I owned this album. It was popular, and Jason and I have talked before about our screw you money that we had when we were living at home with our parents, and like the stuff we would go every Tuesday and buy new CDs and new DVDs at Blockbuster. Like I bought this album when it came out, and I enjoyed it. It was a fine album. While we're talking about music, I think I can wrap up Wild Wild West with the music talk and segue into the music of the next movie that I'm not going to honestly talk very long about. The other movie that came out on June 30th of 1999 was South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. I'm not a South Park fan. I've seen some episodes here and there. In the mid to late '90s, I either watched sports on ESPN or wherever sports were. I watched Comedy Central or I watched MTV. Those were about the only three channels that I watched, and like I said, wherever sports were at. Um, so I caught random episodes of South Park, but I never watched the show. I never cared about the show. It was much like The Simpsons to me. Like it's just not my kind of humor. I understand why other people like it. I fully support you liking whatever makes you laugh. It's just The Simpsons, South Park. That kind of humor is just not mine. Like I'm an Adam Sandler SNL humor kind of guy, and it's just different enough that it's not my jam. So anyway, the music in South Park is probably the one thing that I don't hate about the movie. I thought it was a pretty dumb plot. I didn't enjoy any of the character development or what they had the kids do or what was going on in South Park. Or again, maybe I didn't get a lot of the inside jokes because I wasn't a South Park fan. Maybe I didn't get a lot of references. All possible plausible reasons for why I don't like it. Um, it just wasn't my jam. But the music in it I felt was creative. Now, couldn't tell you very many of the tracks on there. I mean, I've got one that I'm going to talk about that I know, and I only really know it because it was nominated for an Academy Award, Blame Canada, which ended up losing to Phil Collins, one of his Tarzan songs, Thank God, which we just talked about a couple weeks ago. But anyway, like Blame Canada, I thought was a funny, thing. It was enjoyable. I remember a lot of South Park songs being like spoof parody things of Disney stuff, like having the characters sing about what they're doing, like Little Mermaid stuff or Beauty and the Beast stuff. Like I don't remember specifically the song names and I don't remember specifically what movies they were spoofing at the time, but I remember being like, oh, okay, like I I respected this kind of stuff in the same way that, like I said, I'm an SNL humor person. I like when SNL spoofs and parodies, stuff that I like. Like I respected that as far as their music went. But really, that's the only thing that stood out to me. And I just this week I could not bring myself to watch the movie again. I think it's on Paramount Plus to stream, and I considered it. I just again, I mean, at that point, I think South Park came out in '97, maybe '98. So like them doing a movie was like, we're gonna cash in on making a movie real quick about this TV show that's popular. And I didn't get the jokes being a year or two removed. I mean, we've got 20 years of South Park. We have 25 years plus of South Park now. Like I feel like going back and watching this wouldn't even I wouldn't even have any idea what I was getting myself into. And I mean, like, I'm not saying that because like there's 25 more years of content of South Park. I'm just saying like I have been exposed to 25 years of South Park. I've had coworkers that have shown me clips of South Park over the years. I've had people. I mean, I remember the Dungeons and Dragons episode. Everybody made such a huge deal about it that I watched the Dungeons and Dragons episode, and it was fine. It was okay. The first one, I think they may have done another one. Or I think there was also the Twin Peaks episode of South Park that I watched, which I really respect what they did with that. That was a very well done spoof parody of Twin Peaks. Um, and I'm sure they've got other stuff that I would like that. Like it's just not something that I can get into and care about. So when I was thinking about it, I was just like, I'm not interested in going back and rewatching it. That's the one that I'm just talking about from my memories themselves. And again, if you dig South Park, I hope you really like the movie. It's part of 1999 for a reason because it was good for the people that care about it. It sounds like um, just not my jam. Just not something that I care about and didn't want to go back and rewatch. Well, I'm going to be back real quick because these two were Wednesday releases before the July 4th holiday. And we did get one Friday release before the July holiday. On July 2nd, we got our Spike Lee movie from this year, which is Summer of Sam. That's one that I need to hurry up and go watch today or tomorrow so that I can record the episode about Summer of Sam. It's one that I really remember loving. It's the first thing I remember Adrian Brody in. He may have done other stuff before that I've seen, but like this was the moment where I was like, Adrian Brody, blue mohawk. This guy is cool. Um, so yeah, I remember the movie being a lot about paranoia and everybody not really understanding what was going on with the Son of Sam killers. So I'm really looking forward to finding this one and getting to rewatch it here very soon so I can talk about it in just a couple of days.